Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow is ready for talks with the US and NATO in a new sign of easing East-West tensions. It comes after Russia announced it is pulling back some troops from exercises that have raised fears of a potential invasion of Ukraine. Speaking after talks with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Putin said the US and NATO rejected Moscow's demand to keep Ukraine and other ex-Soviet nations out of NATO, as well as halt weapons deployments near Russian borders. Moscow's announcement of a withdrawal of its troops run counter to warnings from the United States and Britain that Russia may be poised to invade Ukraine at any time. So with NATO saying there's no sign of a Russian de-escalation yet, should the West still be concerned about a possible invasion of Ukraine? I'm joined now in the studio by our rights correspondent, Dan Warren. So good to have you on the show, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, how much of an easing of tension is this, and should the West actually believe Russia?
Well, I think this morning when there was reports coming through that some troops were returning back to base, there was this sign of optimism. But they always say the devil is in the detail. And when you look at the detail, all that's happened is Russia that have put thousands of troops along the border and doing military exercises. Some of the military exercises are over and those troops are going back to base. Russia has said on a number of occasions today that this was planned. The situation in effect hasn't changed, but the fact is, up until Arise America at 1 o'clock this morning, we were being told that an invasion was imminent. But I think that is highly unlikely at this stage, because the fact that, as you just reported, Putin has been speaking with the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. So there is dialogue, and I think when there's ever dialogue, that basically stops the sort of immediacy of any sort of invasion at that point.
And let's talk about the implication of Russia's withdrawal for the rest of the world. How do you think the United Nations will be acting at this point? Because a lot of people have criticized the UN for being lackadaisical about this issue, saying that if Russia had gone to war with NATO and then the EU and then the US, I mean, it could have been a turbulent world for the rest of us.
Exactly. I think if there is or had been military action, it would end up into a world war. It wouldn't be a regional, because when you've got Russia on one side and the US are very busy stressing at this point that they would not be going to war. They would be sending troops to assist NATO. They want to make it clear that the US has no intention of going to war with Russia. But the fact is, when you've got US and Russian troops on either side, it becomes a world war. I think the UN will be slightly relieved and more optimistic, but the fact is, really, the situation hasn't changed from this time yesterday. It's just that some military exercises have ended, which were scheduled, and there's still a mass of troops, and Russia is still very unhappy, in effect, about what's happening with Ukraine and their.
Yeah, and talking about Ukraine too, we also read that the president of the country has declared tomorrow a national day, asking citizens to actually come out and show love to the country, bring out their flags and all of that, trying to build national unity and all of that. Considering that it's the same day that the US had predicted that there will be war, what do you think that is all aimed at?
I think that's basically saying, we will be defiant. We might be, much smaller. You can't even compare the size of the two countries, Russia and Ukraine. But it's certainly a message of solidarity. And it was interesting yesterday that the president, of Ukraine was saying Wednesday, and then retracted it to say there could be tension, because Ukraine actually has always been trying to get a message of calm. They've never.
Yeah, I was even surprised with the president actually saying, asking the Western countries to actually calm down. They don't want so much tension. Do you think there was a sort of back channel conversation on the need to actually ensure that the old Soviet Union's reputation is well safeguarded, or some backroom sort of alliance on the need to prevent war, and then to ensure that Russia is actually given an opportunity to have a little say in the Ukraine talk, and not just having the West backing Ukraine all through?
Yeah, I think with the negotiations and conversations which have been going on has been interesting, because Ukraine hasn't actually been in many of the conversations yet. This is what the tension is escalating. In fact, Russia basically, they were interested in talking to France and Germany, who seem to be the bigger players, or they would like to say that they were the main players of the EU. And of course, they've been speaking to the United States. In fact, there's talks with Russia and the United States currently going on at the moment between the two foreign secretaries. But it seems to be NATO have been involved in the conversations, but Russia's dialogue has been with the country's leaders, and the main leaders, like Putin didn't really want to speak to the British Prime Minister. He doesn't believe that Britain is now out of the EU, and he says, in fact, the Foreign Secretary of Russia said that relationships with Britain was at virtually 0%. So they want to speak to the big players, and they want to get their message across.
Very interesting conversation indeed. Now, do you think Putin has been able to achieve some sort of strategy that's to scare away other countries within the axis that may potentially want to join NATO? With this Ukraine situation, do you think he's already sent a very strong tactical message to all of those other countries not to consider joining the NATO? And if they do so, whatever has happened in Ukraine may actually build up within their borders too.
Yes, I think you will find other countries that may wish to join be saying, we will not back down. This is why NATO needs to be strong. We will not have someone like President Putin telling us what to do. But at the same time, Russia has almost unlimited number of troops. They have so much manpower, and and President Putin has proved that they can have a stockpile and build up relatively quickly.
I mean, almost close to 1 million troops.
And the fact is, he's always been unhappy about the potential of Ukraine joining. Ukraine haven't even filled out an application form. They haven't even started the process.
And that's an interesting thing. I don't know why the tension could rise to that extent when they haven't done all the formalities, actually.
Exactly, but he's worried that NATO said 30 years ago we will never expand, and it's expanded 5 times since that point. And every time that there's ever been discussions about it, it gets ignored. So by doing what he's doing, people are now talking about it. So people are taking him seriously, and he claims that no one's coming back with constructive conversations about proposals Russia's putting
And
forward.
how do you think disappointed are the war hawks, actually, those who were already thinking of making some sort of capital out of a potential war between Russia, NATO, US, and all of that? How disappointed do you think they will be?
Very much. I mean, I honestly think that those that are in the war business, so to speak, would be were hoping that in the next few months they would be certainly making their millions or if not billions. I think basically that their chances and their bank accounts will remain where they are for the time being.
Very interesting indeed. And just very quickly, what would have been the potentials of the economic challenges that the EU would have faced if they had gone into war with Russia, considering the gas supplies from Russia to the EU?
Well, that's the biggest worry, and despite the assurances from Russia to say if there is action, we will still provide gas. One, would they? And secondly, what would the cost be if it went up 100%, tripled or, times by 100, they could charge what they like. So there'd certainly be an energy shortage. And even if these Western governments sanction and crippling sanctions, as they're called, all these Russian companies, a lot of them still trade in these countries. And like, for example, Apple and Google were saying it would affect them massively, their own bank balances, if they started sanctioning how Russian companies that use their businesses. So everybody would end up basically missing out. Everyone would be affected.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Dan Warren, Arise news anchor, joining us to take a critical look at this issue and how these tensions have been de-escalated by the new posture by Russia's strongman Vladimir Putin. We must thank you for being on the show. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Samna Sambo.